Hey, great thinkers. I'm Eric Thurwanger. Just wanted to welcome you back to another episode of the Think Great Experience. And I am extremely excited about today's episode. Today, we are going to be joined by Joe Schmit. Joe Schmit has been in the broadcasting industry since the 70s. I hope it's okay that I said that, Joe.
Yeah.
Sports anchor, news anchor, author of two books right now, and also a professional speaker, maybe more books, but a professional speaker who has a very powerful message on impacting people, which today, there may be no greater time than right now to have an impact. Joe, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Eric. It's great to be here. I love your Think Great experience. That's like fantastic marketing. It's a great tag. It's perfect.
Well, thank you. I just wanted to feature people who have experienced greatness in their lives and are willing to share some secrets on it so we could all have more greatness, which we need it now more than ever. 13 months into the pandemic, we could all use a little bit of greatness. Joe, if you don't mind, we have listeners all over the world. I would just love them. You're here in the Twin Cities with us, and can you just share a little bit about your background with us for people who may not have heard of you yet?
Okay, sure. Well, I grew up in a small town in Wisconsin, and I was a huge sports fan, and I played every sport I could possibly play. I was like one of those kids. If we had ESPN back then, I probably would have stayed in front of ESPN 24/7.
Yep.
And at some point in my career, or in my life, somebody said, "You know something, Joe, with your big mouth and your love of sports, you ought to be a sportscaster." And from that day on, I decided I wanted to be a sportscaster. Now, I talk about impact when I'm speaking. Well, that had an impact on me. That one comment really changed the arc of my life. And I thought I could do this for a living. And I've worked my way up kind of like a minor league baseball player. I went single A, double A, triple A, and I got to the big time market. Top 20 market's considered a big time in this business. Minneapolis, St. Paul. I came in 1985. I've been very fortunate to cover some amazing events. Pretty much everything in the world I've covered, and I've been able to interview some of the biggest names and get great stories. But I've also done a lot of personal stories on young athletes and coaches fighting adversity and overcoming obstacles. And that's been as rewarding as well.
It's interesting because when we think about sports, sometimes we may not think about all the sports you have covered. And I understand you have pretty much covered every imaginable sport out there. And am I correct in the fact that you've earned 17 Emmys?
It's actually 18, but who's counting?
18. Okay. Well, hey, they just keep coming. How great is that? Well, congratulations on that. And for being able to follow your dream and the guidance of somebody who said your love of sports and a big mouth. Hey, I just think it's great that you combined those two. You have witnessed people in the sports arena making an impact on other people. So you've witnessed impact for decades.
Yeah, and what happened, here's what kind of happened, and the reason I wrote books and started speaking professionally. Because I'm a person who's on TV every night, I get asked to speak at charity events and Rotaries and Lions clubs and Optimist clubs. And I used to go and tell the win one for the Gipper stories. I would tell what it was like to be inside the locker and being on TV every night and how I felt. And at some point, I started telling stories about people who made an impact. And all of a sudden, I realized the audience was listening. The audience was liking it. I had people come up to me saying, "You ought to write a book. You ought to write a book." And after about the 100th time when somebody said, "You ought to write a book," and I wrote a book. And interestingly, one of the athletes I covered was a guy by the name of Walter Bond. He played for the Minnesota Gophers when they had a nice basketball team, made a run into the grade eights. And Walter ended up playing in the NBA for a few years. Walt and I remained friends. Well, Walter right now is one of the top motivational speakers in the country. He's a Hall of Fame speaker. He is big time. Well, Walter saw me speak one day at some event, and he came up to me afterwards. He goes, "We're having coffee next week." And anyway, he said, "You got to do this. You've got stories. You know what you're doing on the stage." And that's how the whole business started. And that's how all of a sudden my passion became studying people who make an impact. And that's really what I do. And I tell their stories and I do the research on it. And then I, in turn, try to help people figure out how they can lead a life of impact and make a bigger impact by being more aware and intentional of what they do.
I love that you're transferring the ability to make an impact to anyone who reads your book, anyone that hears you speak. Because I think sometimes people feel that, okay, maybe everybody on a sports team can make an impact. maybe the CEO can make an impact, but you're empowering people at all levels to make an impact, which I think is huge. I love that you say in your book, it's not just the person in the corner office who can make an impact. It's the person who may clean the corner office who can make an impact. I think that's brilliant. That gives us all hope in a time period we need it the most. So you've got to be feeling great about the fact that everyday people can make an impact.
And that's what I do, because when I speak, I realize right now, especially during the pandemic, there are a lot of people emotionally in debt. And I also realize we're dealing with a bunch of different generations in the workplace, and people talk about having communication problems. And I say baloney. I said, we can get along with everybody. We can connect with everybody, because no matter if you're 8 or you're 88 years old, as a human, we all have one trait. We all want to be acknowledged. We all want to feel that we have value to the organization, to our friends, to our people. And one good way to do that is by making an impact and letting people know you care. Now more than ever, you got to let people know you care. And that's what I've really learned out of the pandemic.
Yeah, I think that we've all had to shift. Certainly my message as a speaker, your message as a speaker is more important now than ever. The fact that people need help guiding their way through this. And we're coming out of the pandemic, but I feel like we're going into the transition phase right now. And people struggle with transitions. You know, I was in the military, so people struggle with the transition out of the military, even though they'll go take that hill for you. But then this transition phase is hard. I know that when I was my wife's caregiver, she had a year of treatments for non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. And then they said, okay, you're in remission. You can take her home now. The transition phase was very hard, but you have also experienced a huge challenge in your life. And you were still impacting people during that challenge. Can you take us back to 2008 when you received that call?
Yeah, we have something in common, and unfortunately, way too many people have this in common.
Yes.
They've had cancer. In 2008, I was diagnosed with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, and it was just a very interesting journey, because I was originally diagnosed in 2008. And because my cancer was slow moving, the doctor told me, he said, why don't we watch and wait this thing for a while? We'll keep an eye on you. And then we'll treat you in the summer. So this was May of 2008, and they were going to treat me in the summer. Well, in that immediate time period, I decided I was going to get ready for chemotherapy. I put my old jock shoes back on. I got myself in the best shape of my adult life. I hired a personal trainer. I was ready to go. And I went back to the doctor in after summer was over, because I spent time with my kids and my family. And they looked at the test, and the doctor said, we're not going to treat you right now. Your cancer is doing nothing. And it's really where I kind of learned a valuable lesson, because I was mad. I was so ready to get the treatment that when they told me I wasn't going to get treatment, I was mad. Now, 10 minutes later, I was doing cartwheels. Yeah. But it was a very interesting experience about going all in and the power of positivity. That's right. 2 years later, I ended up starting my treatment, and I was very fortunate. I had 4 months of chemotherapy, and I've been clean since then. But what I did was I really decided that too many times we get caught up in the destination that we don't enjoy the journey. And my journey of cancer was one of love and learning and impact. And it was what I learned and how you see other people react. There were so many lessons out of that I've taken for the rest of my life. And I'm sure you can kind of relate to that.
Yes. Yeah. As a caregiver, you're on the journey. You're just in a different role. And so I remember, I was the first person my wife called when she had the news. And I remember exactly where I was. I was in Santa Monica, California. I was sitting at my workstation. I was in a DVD company, so we made DVDs. The whole world stopped. And it gives you a different perspective on life, on everything you do. And so, one of the things reading about your story, you were so concerned with how your children were going to feel about it. That here you are diagnosed with cancer, and you are focused on what impact it will make on them.
Yeah, I tell the story because when I got a call from Mayo Clinic that said I had lymphoma, and the doctor told me it's non-curable. You'll have it the rest of your life. You're looking at 2.5 years of chemotherapy. I mean, he laid it all on the line. And I remember I closed my door in my office, and I thought to myself, all right, now what am I supposed to do? And I remember I wasn't mad and I wasn't scared, but I started getting nervous because I knew I had to start telling people. And my wife and I decided that we would tell our kids individually, and not even sure why we did. This is one of the great lessons we learned. And we told them individually. My oldest daughter was 15. She wanted to hug it out, cry it out. My middle daughter was 13, kind of a typical middle teenager. She was like, how's this cancer stuff going to affect me in my social life? You know,
that's right.
She's a 13-year-old kid.
She has her priorities.
My 10-year-old, my son, the minute we said cancer, he put his hand up and he said he didn't want to hear another word. And 2 days later, he said that, Mom, when Dad loses all his hair, will it grow back? So we knew we had to watch him.
Yeah.
But what we learned out of that was everybody responds differently. And too many times we put our judgment on people on how they're going to react to stress, anxiety, heartache, bad news, whatever it is. How many times do we judge people on how they respond?
That's right.
Everybody responds differently. I remember when I had a close friend die, somebody told me there are no rules for grief. And I kind of put that into this cancer journey. There are no rules for how people are going to respond.
That's right.
I had friends who kind of shied away from me because they didn't want to talk about it. They didn't want to face it, you know? And I had other friends who overwhelmed me with calls and kindness and what have you. And I decided that in order to be healthy mentally, you couldn't judge anybody.
That's right.
You couldn't judge anybody. And that was a big lesson.
You know, it's interesting when you have cancer enter your world, you research cancer. I know you went to Google, you were looking up non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. When my wife was first diagnosed with it, they told her that she had lung cancer. And so when I first looked it up, the fatality rate was so high, I didn't even want to share that with her. Then they re-diagnosed it and found out it was non-Hodgkin's. But the interesting part is everybody reacted to it differently in our world too. And it impacted everybody. And I started researching more that they were saying that 1 out of 3 people will have some form of cancer, but 1 out of 1 people will be impacted by it. And that really caused me to think at first about intertwining it into my own speeches. So you always wonder how much personal content should you put in, how much business content. And it's interesting, I'll share my personal story, being a Marine, becoming a caregiver. And then I ran a media company in Southern California for many years. We had all this growth. It was awesome. After the presentation, people come up and say, you know, my uncle served in the Marine Corps, or my aunt had cancer. And it's that personal story, I think, really makes the content much more relatable. Do you find that too?
Oh, absolutely, Eric. The power of a story is fantastic. The first thing I do as a speaker is I try to connect with the audience emotionally, because then I know I can connect with them intellectually. And I don't use slides in my presentation. A lot of people use slides. I don't judge you whether you use them or not. And here's why. When I start, I tell some personal stories. I tell some stories about people I've worked with and dealt with. I tell a story about my dad in the bar. I want people to be thinking about, I tell them my dad looks like a little Danny DeVito. I want them in their mind making this picture. And afterwards, when I'm done speaking, I'll have people come up to me and say, I've been in that bar. Not that bar specifically, but we have a bar like that in our community in Nebraska or Oklahoma, wherever I'm speaking. And it's very interesting how people do it. And it reminds me of the theory. How many times have you seen a movie after you've read a book? What's the first thing you say? You say, the book was better. You know why? Because in your mind, you painted the picture.
I like that.
And,
I like that.
So I let people paint their own picture. And that way, I think it's more memorable. So then when you get down to the lesson, you know, here's the tangible takeaway out of that story. Here's how you can make more impact. They're going to remember it more because the power of the story.
So let me ask you this. We've talked about impact many times already in this episode. When did you know that would become your dominating theme for what you're sharing with people? Because, you know, for us, it's greatness. So we're teaching people how to think great, how to achieve greatness. We're having you on today because you've had levels of greatness and people will learn from it. But that word, I even have that word in my signature, Joe. My signature line in my email says, think great and make an impact.
Yeah.
But you've built a whole program or a concept or a philosophy around impact. Can you just tell me more about why that word? And I have your book here, Silent Impact. Mm-hmm. Your next book is The Impact Blueprint.
Just
So
happen to have one right here.
I need to get that.
Yeah, I'll send one.
Okay. Why that word? Of all the words you could have chosen, why impact?
So when I started speaking professionally, the name of my speech was The Pursuit of Happiness. And I quickly realized that it's good, but it's a little soft. I wasn't going to get Fortune 500 companies to come in and talk about happiness, although I think today that would happen. And,
I agree.
And I'm a big believer in self-improvement. Just because I'm used to being on TV every night and being on the stage with a microphone doesn't intimidate me.
Yep.
I'm not afraid to talk in front of audiences because I have one of these in front of my life, most of my life.
Yeah.
But I hired a coach in Texas, and I worked with her team. And basically what we were going to be working on was trying to define who I am, what my audience is, and who I would kind of market and how I would market. And her name was Winnell Teague and her partners. But she dragged it out of me. And because I was talking about, she goes, well, what are you really talking about? Well, I said, what these people do is they it's like a silent impact. And then about 5 minutes later, I said, we make our biggest impressions when we're not trying to be impressive. And Winnell says, okay, I want you to stop now. I wrote down two things: silent impact, and we make our biggest impressions when we're not trying to be impressive.
Wow.
That's the basis of your speech. And she dragged it out of me as I was talking about it. And then she made me do research. So when I did that, you did that, let off with the story about, the person who has the biggest impact might not be the person in the corner office. It might be the person who cleans the corner office. We got that out of research. We research companies and organizations, small, medium, and large. And one of the questions I asked was this: if there were a going away party tonight, who would the most people show up for? And out of that, we found this person of impact. And that's when we found out sometimes it was the security guard. Sometimes it was the person who cleaned the corner office. Sometimes it was the person in the corner office. But many times what I figured out is we can all be leaders, and we certainly can all make an impact. And then we asked the opposite question, because I thought, if we want to dig deep, who would the least amount of people show up for? Well, guess what? That person was not a person of impact. That person did not have a lot of positive traits. That person was not a great team player. All the negative traits you would associate. But then we dug a little deeper, and we found out that the reason that person was not productive and not happy and not the person everybody would go to their going away party was because the job was too big for them. You could save that person potentially, if they wanted to be saved, by getting them some more help or putting them in the right position. Somebody hired that person because they thought they'd be a good fit.
Yeah.
Now we know that sometimes you just have to get rid of people.
Sometimes, yeah.
But other times you can save that person. The reason that person is upset and frustrated and negative is because that job's way too big.
That's right. I love that everybody can make an impact, and that empowers me. And I feel like I'm an impact player, but reading your book re-injuvenated that desire for me to make an impact. So I know it's happening with people as they hear you speak, as they read your book. But you, in addition to taking the stage and speaking, which for you is easy, for me, I actually have a slight form of glossophobia. So the fear of public speaking is in me, but it's in most people, I think. And I can get on stage when I feel like I'm going to make an impact in somebody's life. When you're on stage and you're speaking about the impact, there's the keynote speech, and we've done those probably hundreds or thousands of them, but you also go into businesses. It's not just the stage. You're going in and meeting their teams. And why are business leaders bringing you in to make an impact? Can you share a little bit about the impact you're making inside of corporate America in these businesses? Yeah.
Well, when I first started, that's all I did was keynote. And then people wanted a breakout session. Then people wanted a half-day session. Then people wanted some, some counseling and some coaching afterwards. And then people wanted a year-long program. So basically, I was just listening to what people wanted. They wanted more and more and more. So I kept developing more. I've got a year-long program where I send out monthly videos to keep the momentum going for the meeting. That really became my second book. There's 52 traits that people have who make an impact, like gratitude and initiative and respect and communication. And then I do a story and then something they can do in each one of them. But that grew out of just listening to what people wanted. You and I have both worked with a business, Charlie Lawson at GCS Title.
Yep.
And I went in and I did the first session. And then I think a year or two later, you went in, and I just happened to talk to Charlie this week. And he said, Joe, you laid the foundation. And then Erik came in. You guys were a great 1-2 punch. And that's kind of a prime example, because when I went into that business, I knew that Charlie was a 100% type A go-getter who was worried about how business was doing profit-wise. And I went in and I said, Charlie, you're not letting the people know you care. And I went to one of his meetings, and he started the meeting off talking about the profit and loss statement. And anyway, I got him to see that if he was a leader who showed compassion, if he led with positive reinforcement, that his business would be a lot better. And anyway, it has grown. It's a lot better. His team is stronger than it's ever been. And he said, what you did on top, your message on top of it, just made it continue to grow. The business continues to grow. They never, even in the economy, during the pandemic, they never have a bad month, because they use excuses, but they all help each other out. They really develop that culture. And that's one thing that I guess when somebody brings me in, I want to work on that company culture. I want to help them make better connections. I want them to know each other better.
Impacting culture. I think culture has taken a hit during the pandemic. I mean, for obvious reasons, we're not together. So, I feel that every business should be back in the people business right now, right? And not just profits, not just our process and products, but we've had to refocus on people. And I think that's what you did at GCS Title. And thank you for laying that foundation that I could help to build upon. We may be the most powerful 1-2 punch in business coaching. We're gonna have to team up a little bit, Joe.
I think so.
But I love that you have that foundational principle of making an impact in culture, because culture is all about people, and people have been disrupted this last 13 months. And let me ask you this: when people are in survival mode, like many feel like that right now, there's uncertainty, there's a lot of anxiousness, a lot of fear, a lot of doubt. We're going into a transition phase. How important is it right now that when we're in survival mode, here you are bringing in this concept of impact? Is that being well received right now from people who are just kind of treading water? And what is that doing for them when you mentioned they can make an impact even during this weird phase in our lives?
More than ever, it's needed now. And more than ever, businesses and leaders have to lead with that compassion and that caring, and listen and schedule themselves to go out and get to know their people on a personal level. There's a ton of anxiety, people going back to work.
Yes.
There are people who have been away from the office for a year or 13 months who are now transitioning back to the office, and they're kind of scared to go back.
Yeah.
And how are they going to respond? Are they going to be wearing masks? All these things that they have on their mind. I liked working better at home. I was more productive at home. So, however, it's kind of what you said right from the very beginning. It's another transition, and it's another change, and people are never comfortable with change. And what I try to teach is you have to dare to be different, and that fear's okay. And that, every once in a while, in order to have growth, you have to push yourself. In order to have growth, you do have to have some fear and be uncomfortable.
That's right. Let me ask you, because I know what we've experienced from the speaking world or coaching world during the pandemic. I mean, we've all had to shift. We've all gone from walking the big stages and the big crowds to this little 16:9 box that we're operating in. How have you shifted your own delivery of your message now that we are virtual? How has that impacted your ability to deliver that message on impact?
The interesting thing is, I think my television experience helps me quite a bit, because I'm used to staring into a camera and talking.
Yeah.
I tend to use, because I don't use slides, I now use a few more visual aids and I use a couple of videos. So I try to design my show that people are sick of Zooms, right? They're zoomed out.
Virtual fatigue. Yep.
Yeah. So if you're gonna just stand there and talk and have another virtual conversation, you're gonna lose people. There's no question you're gonna lose people. So You either have to make it so compelling or you have to continue to change it up. I design it like I design a TV show, and that's pacing. I might tell a 7-minute story, which means we'll do a 1-minute exercise and I'll do this, and then we'll run a video, and then we'll have a question and answer. So you just keep changing it up on the people to keep them interested and involved.
Yeah.
But Eric, the response has been pretty amazing. And the number one thing that I kind of get back is you don't realize how badly I needed this. And that's right. And that's usually when I go back to the company and I said, how would you like to do the year-long program now where I send you videos every month? Please, please, please. I mean, that's sales, but at the same time, it's like, it tells you they need more.
That's right. Well, it's interesting. What I noticed is that people were hiring me to speak during the pandemic, maybe midway through it. They started to ask the question, have you done a lot on Zoom? Have you done a lot of virtual? Because I think they were finding some speakers were cut out for it and some weren't. Now, with your background, 100% cut out for it. I actually had to kind of train myself a little bit. I was recording myself so I could get better at it because it wasn't natural for me like it is for you. So when people bring you in on the virtual platform or in person or even hybrid, that's the big buzzword now, right? Hybrid, we're do both at the same time. You're an absolute pro. You're an absolute natural at this. But for a lot of us, that was a harder transition,
Yeah, and I get it. And that transition has been there for everybody. And I have news for people in the speaking industry and the meeting industry is hybrid and webinars and Zooms are here to stay. Now, we will all be together and there are more and more meetings opening up as we get through towards the end of this thing. But there will always be some part of it because people are now used to it. Right. People now have the technology. They now, if they're smart, they have lights. And I mean, if they're a presenter, they have lights, cameras, action. They're ready to roll on that. So, but that's here to stay. Yeah. And it's just another way to communicate with people.
Well, I love your message. I love the message on impact, but you've done more than just say, well, we need to make we have the ability to make a silent impact. We should make an impact. You actually have created a program out of this. And I'll say you have the 3 Ps, right? Purpose, persistence, passion. So you have some things that people can really lock into that aren't limited to any one business. What I'm hearing is every industry out there could make an impact and should probably apply the 3 Ps. How did you come up with the 3 Ps? I love that, by the way.
That once again came up, purpose, persistence, and passion. That once again came up with working with my coach as we kind of broke down the speech, because we wanted to be very organized in the speech, and not only organized in where the stories were and how they played, but what the takeaways were. And we ended up dividing it into those 3 areas. That's the way I laid out my book. That's the way I lay out my presentation. And, it just things work well in 3 Ps, purpose, persistence, and passion. It just kind of came naturally. There's a lot there if you look for it. That's right. Sometimes it's right in front of our face and we just have to kind of find it. And it's worked out well for me. People remember it.
Well, your own story about cancer was in the persistence section of your book.
Yeah.
How important during cancer, how important pre-COVID, during COVID, after COVID, how important is mindset right now?
Mindset, it's 100% right now, right? It's how are you going to stay positive when there's a lot of negativity going around you? How are you going to be the person everybody wants to show up? They're going away party. And I think that I've actually changed a little bit. In the area of persistence, I talk about being persistent in your positivity and persistent in your preparation. But I have started using the word mindset because we're taught to be positive from the time we're 3 years old. Sure. Have a good attitude, positivity, all this kind of stuff. And I realize you can't do it 100% of the time. But if you have a positive mindset, that you realize that, hey, here's a time when somebody could go a little negative, but if your mindset is positive, it makes it a lot easier. And I try to, when I coach people, I say, will it matter in 5 days? Will this matter in 5 hours? Will it matter in 5 minutes? And I also think that, when people are talking about change and anxiety, I also say on a scale of 1 to 10, where does this rank? Seriously, look at it on a scale of 1 to 10, where does it rank? If it ranks at a 7, you should react at about a 5. Don't react at a 9.
That's
you
right.
know,
That's right.
and I think that's where sometimes people, that's mindset. That's mindset.
Joe, that may be one of the best tips I've ever heard, especially in an era that we live in right now, where everybody is taking a 1 and reacting like it's a 10.
Yes,
I,
100%.
I mean, we are in a hyper sensitive world where, I was speaking the other day and everybody knew that Mr. Potato Head had been canceled, but did not know that we had bombed Syria. And I thought, okay, we are focused on way too many things. We're missing some of the big things that we should be focused. I'm not saying people need to focus on a missile strike, but it's interesting some of the things they're missing in their life because they don't have that mindset. I feel what you're saying, that positive mindset is so critical right now, because if you go on social media, it's pretty negative. If you turn on most of the news, not you, most of the news can be negative. In fact, you could talk to friends and family and they're negative. And some people may be the only source of positivity in somebody's life right now. So for us to commit to having that positive mindset is huge. I love that you've enhanced the delivery of it to be mindset. Everybody's agreed for years mindset's important. But during the pandemic and during this transition, and as we go into this great new era that we're going to go into, this blended era, if we don't have control over our mindset, I think we can lose control of a lot of things. We're seeing people lose faith, lose hope, lose enthusiasm. So your message on mindset, impact, having passion, I think it's so needed right now, especially the mindset part.
I'm working on something that kind of relates to that mindset. You mentioned social media. And I think that a lot of times if we look at our problems, our issues, our concerns, what keeps you up at night, there's a lie, the truth, and a solution. So for example, social media, Facebook, everything that's posted out there is your lie. You post pictures where you look good, where you look skinny, where you're a hero, where you're on the beach, where you're not gonna show the picture you just woke up and your hair is crazy and whatever. So that's the lie. The truth is, everybody thinks that their lives are perfect in the lie. Well, the truth is nobody's life is perfect. We all have problems. We all have down times. We all have, things in our life we wish were better. And the solution is to recognize that. Don't live and die by the number of likes you have and who's posting what and what have you. So in almost every problem, there's a lie, the truth, and a solution. And I think if you have the right mindset, you can find that solution.
And what's interesting is I know your philosophy of going in and speaking, going into businesses to help them is to find solutions. And today's solutions are different than last year's solutions, especially those solutions on culture. I know we have a lot of business leaders, business owners listening right now. What are some of the solutions that you're helping identify during the pandemic, during all this anxiety and uncertainty? Are there some solutions that are standing out that impact culture more?
Well, the simple one is lead with care and compassion and connection. I have 3 C's now: care, compassion, and connection.
I love that.
Because if you're leading with trying to make money, every business is out there to make money. That's fine. But if that's the way you lead into it, you might make money, but it's going to be a heck of a lot harder than if you lead with the 3 C's. Every employee in our research wants 3 things. They want a successful company.
Yep.
No one wants to work for a company they're afraid is going to either get sold or lay people off or move to China. They want to work for a company that as the company grows, they have a chance to grow with their good work. And the third thing is they want a company that truly cares about them and cares about the community that they serve. So now more than ever, that's what leaders should be focusing on, because more people leave their job not because they feel underpaid. They leave their job because they feel underappreciated. And I have a speaker friend of mine. He's a legend, Mike McKinley. He does a little bit. He goes, nobody ever quit a job when they say, every time I turn around, they're patting me on the back. I can't take it anymore.
But what's amazing about that is how simple is that? That's one of those aha moments as leaders that we have to have. And I love that you brought up appreciation. I read a study from the Atlanta Journal-Constitution years ago that said the number one reason people stay at a business So I think 71% said the same answer. They felt appreciated. And it wasn't even, I make a lot of money. Maybe that was 7 or 8. But that feeling of appreciation, and it doesn't cost us anything as leaders, just time, but you have to truly care. And that's what we need to get back into. That solution of caring is so simple. I think sometimes we look for this big overarching solution. We're looking, and you just gave it to us. It's caring. Can we care about our people? Oh, go ahead, Jeff.
I just had a thought I don't want to lose, because that's what happens in my mind when we get talking. And it's 100% right. We got to care. But I was interviewing Bud Grant about a year ago, the legendary coach of Minnesota Vikings, 4 Super Bowls. He's in the Hall of Fame, an amazing leader. And I asked him, I said, what's the key to leadership? What made you a good leader? How did you find leaders on your team? And he said, what you have to do is you have to figure out how to lead each person. He goes, I had players who needed love. I had players who needed to be kicked in the butt. I had players who needed to be left alone. I had players who, so you kind of find out as a leader what they need. You might have some employees who don't want you to care for them. They might want money. They might want time off. But there are other people who don't want time off or don't want, everybody wants money, but that might not be their priority. Their priority might be somebody patting them on the back, telling them they're doing a good job. I always say, don't reward somebody after the project's done. Reward the progress.
That's right.
Reward the progress as they're going on. And too many times people wait until it's over.
I think we're seeing a lack of recognition in the workplace during this pandemic. I always tell people, when I served in the military, if you looked at their left chest pocket of a service member, there's all the ribbons and medals they've won during the tough times. And here we are in a tough time, and recognition is dipped. Not for everybody, but in a lot of cases, that appreciation, the praising, the recognition, I feel like when we're in survival mode, sometimes we forget that in the business sector, but you're bringing it back to the forefront. Because I ask a simple question of business leaders, what's your greatest asset? And they always say people. But then there's not a lot of evidence to convict them of being a people business. It's like, well, isn't that the answer I'm supposed to say? What I like is that you're challenging leaders to get back to the basics. First of all, I love Bud Grant. I'm originally from California. And so I remember watching a game. I don't know how cold it was, 0. And Bud Grant walked out in a polo shirt. And I was like, oh my gosh, this guy's a stud. From California, 50 degrees is cold for us. But now I'm here in Minnesota, so I'm trying to toughen up a little bit. I did the polar plunge, though.
Oh, good for you.
Yeah. So, a little give back. I got talked into it. Did it. Wasn't as bad as I thought. But I think, going back and putting people as a priority, and that's really why I did the polar plunge. They were talking about people who would benefit, and I jumped. And I want to touch down on your ability to give back. You have done amazing things in your career, but you have also raised awareness, raised millions of dollars for charities. If people want to achieve greatness in their life, how important is it to pay it forward, to give back?
It's beyond important. If you want to lead a healthy, happy, productive life, you got to give back. I have yet to meet a miserable person who gives of themselves. Most of my great friends are, people who give. They're givers. You meet 2 kinds of people in the world, Eric, right? You meet someone who shakes your hand and say, hi, Eric, nice to meet you. What can you do for me? Or, hi, Eric, nice to meet you. What can I do for you? If you're the latter, you're going to have a much more fulfilling life. You're going to have more friends. You're going to have great things happen to you through karma because you've established this network. You are building friendship and relationship equity that someday down the line can pay back. So I was, because I'm on TV, I decided to use my platform to help charities and help raise money. And in turn, it helps you. I mean, let's be honest, when I'm running a golf tournament, it's my golf tournament and I'm giving checks to big brothers, big sisters. It helps big brothers, but it's certainly good for my PR image. That was not the main goal. Is it a back goal? Probably, to be honest. Yeah, sure. Yeah. But the rewards were just tenfold. And the friends that I have out of doing major events like that they'll be friends for life.
Yeah. I think that giving back, I remember when Gina had cancer, we we hosted or I was the event chair and she was a team captain for the Relay for Life. And so we walked the track, and in California, you walked it for 24 hours, or you had a team. We actually had people at the media company show up, and it formed bonds and a camaraderie I don't think we would have gotten just by duplicating or editing tapes. You know what I mean? There was just this, there was this family feel that was created. And recently, about a few years ago, we launched our own foundation, the Think Great Foundation. And all we do, we're a one-trick pony, but we love our pony. We award scholarships to military spouses. And we handed out the very first year 25,000 in scholarships. And some of these spouses walked across the stage, and I knew what was coming, and I got choked up. It was better than I ever thought. The giving back part, I feel, was better than, any speech I've ever given. To help somebody out who needed it was so powerful. I made an impact in somebody's life, and that fueled my fire. So I know where you're coming from with the make an impact. I haven't quantified it to the degree you have, but it fires me up every day to make an impact. You just gave us a way to do it, which is what I love.
It's so important, getting back to, we mentioned Charlie, getting back, Charlie had mentioned that, he tries to have their employees schedule 5 hours a week to do things in the community. That builds, and guess what? You take 1 or 2 of your employees with you when you go volunteer at the food shelf, or you volunteer.
That's right.
Type of thing. That builds that camaraderie and connections that can go on and on. That you were asking for a solution. The one thing that I always encourage the leaders that I work with is schedule yourself impact time.
Oh,
I don't care if it's 15 minutes a day. I don't care if it's a half hour. If you're better off doing it in 1 hour. And that's where you either walk around, find out how people are doing, you bring somebody over for coffee, you have lunch, you talk to somebody, you get to know them a little bit better. And when you do that, you make those connections that count. And then you understand people a little bit better, what makes them tick.
Joe, I love that. I speak with leaders all the time about it. How important is it for us to empower our people? Critical. It's a 10 out of 10. How much time do you have scheduled today to empower somebody? Well, I don't. Okay, so it's probably not going to happen. I love scheduling my impact time. I'm going to do that today. I'm going to schedule 15 minutes out to make an impact. And it becomes a habit, a positive habit. I think that's brilliant. You're bringing this foundational idea to businesses about putting people first again. I just start thinking, if a leader can make an impact in the team, imagine when the entire team starts making an impact on a daily basis.
One of the things I do in my presentations is once I explain impact and silent impact, and I tell a couple of stories so people are really getting what it's all about. And they're starting to realize that it's really powerful and profound and contagious, and it can last a long, long time. I have them take their phones out, and I have them think about somebody who's made an impact in their life, somebody who's always there for them, and maybe somebody they haven't contacted for a while. And I have them send a text. And the text I have them send is, I'm listening to a speaker today talk about people who make an impact. Wow. And I thought of you. And then about 40 minutes later in the presentation, I'll go around the room and have people volunteer the responses they got. And it's sometimes amazing. I can't tell, every single speech I do, I have somebody say, you don't know how badly I needed this today.
Wow.
Boy, you've been an impact person for me, the things that come back. And it leads me into saying, you never know when the person sitting next to you is going through something heavy. You never know when they're in pain. That's when they just need somebody to acknowledge them, to value them, to let them know they care. And if you can be that person, you're the person who makes an impact. You might help that person get through the next 5 minutes. You might help them get through the day. But even if it's the next 5 minutes, that's what you've done. So then what I'll say is, okay, now your assignment for the rest of the week is I want you to text somebody every day and let them know you care.
I mean, what a phenomenal skill set to build in people. We should be, it's another, you're bringing up more aha moments where you say, I should be doing this anyways. This is what I should be doing, but you're bringing it to the light. So you also mentioned something. I love your Mount Rushmore idea. Can you share a little bit about that? Because as soon as I read about that, as soon as I heard you speak about it, I started thinking about it. I mean, it is profound. It is deep. It's another aha moment, but it impacted me significantly.
So somewhere along the line, as I was doing research and writing, I started thinking, what motivates people? And it's one thing to go and do a speech and everybody's ready to go and they're all pumped up. You're like a coach and the team's running out of the locker room. They'll knock down the wall for you. But I started thinking and I said, I have to come up with an exercise or a metaphor that works for people to think about who had an impact on them in their life. And that's when I came up, if you could build your own Mount Rushmore of influence, who would be in your Mount Rushmore? So this is one I did for the Minnesota Wild. I worked with their staff and management a few years ago. And on the backside, I did this. And I hand out a sheet. I've got a thing that I work with all the time. And I tell people, I say, okay, I want you to think deep. And I want you to put who's on your Mount Rushmore, but I'm not going to let you put your parents down because that's two easy ones, or maybe one easy one, depending if you had a bad relationship. Somebody who helped you become the person you are today. Somebody who got you through a tough time. Somebody who is the reason you're sitting in this room today. And then people will do it. And then I have them discuss at the table. And it's very eye-opening because it's a great team building exercise, because all of a sudden you're going, I had an aunt like that too. I had a neighbor like that too. My English teacher was my, biggest person in my life. My coach in high school, I was going to be, I was going to go the bad way in drugs and alcohol. He talked me into coming back here. Right. And then they become a lot of my stories, because I'll get these stories back. They become really powerful parts of the stories. And then what I encourage people to do, I say, okay, you've just done it with your coworkers. Now go home and do it with your family. I said, if the next time you get together for a holiday or whatever, I said, do this with your kids and your grandkids. Because I did a speech. It was in northern Minnesota. It was a leadership weekend where they sent 100 high schools, sent 2 leaders and their parents. I worked with the kids in the morning. I worked with the parents in the afternoon, and we brought them all together at night. And one of the exercises I did was I had them do their Mount Rushmore. Well, in the night session, I had the kids compare their notes to their parents, and the parents connect their Mount Rushmore to the kids. When I was done speaking, I had a line over here of kids and a line over here of parents. The parents were saying, I learned more about my kid today than I did in the first 17 years of his life. I had kids coming up to me and say, I learned more about my mom and dad today than I've ever known before. So then I tell people, I say, we all have that person in our life. Tell their story. But not only that, remember why they made an impact and then emulate what they did.
I love that you can enhance households. If you can get parents and teenagers to connect on a deeper level, you can do anything, Joe. And that's what I'm hearing right now is there's probably a lot of people listening to this that are experiencing a disconnect in the workplace right now, which is understandable. We're not aligned as a team. We're not aligned as people. We're distanced. We're wearing masks, double masking, triple masking, whatever's going on out there. It is having an impact on the culture. If somebody was considering right now bringing you in, what might they expect from, maybe it's a keynote, even just a kickoff meeting or something that they can build upon, but to bring you in would help them to do what in their business right now when there's so much turmoil?
Well, the first thing I do is before I tell them what I can do for them, I ask a question like, if I could wave a magic wand and get rid of a problem you have or an issue you have, something you're concerned about that keeps you up at night, what would it be? And now I'm getting back a lot of culture, anxiety coming back. Yes. And I'll say, okay, let's try to figure out some ways to do that. So then I would customize my presentation that way. And I would probably, and what I'd like to do is, I'm sure you do the same thing. I like to interview a lot of people before I speak. So you kind of find out where they're coming from. I do not know their business. I am not going to know the insurance business or the banking business or whatever I get hired to do, as well as the people working in it.
Right.
But what I can do is I can work on the stuff that I've researched, people who are more aware and intentional with their impact, and I'll give you the tools to do that.
Yeah.
So yes, it becomes a company culture speech. It becomes a connection speech. It becomes a speech where you can really have this high performance team when they all kind of get it. And
I feel that bringing you in is a way for leaders to recapture their purpose.
Yeah.
In other words, I don't I feel, and I was in the Marine Corps, so I went through leadership development. I served during the time period of the Gulf War back in the day. So I just dated myself. But in the military, leaders are trained, developed, and prepared for chaos. In the business sector, we're trained, developed, prepared to avoid chaos, and nobody can avoid this. And so you have leaders who are thrust into the real purpose of leadership, but they have no clue what to do right now. I really see you as a catalyst for leaders being able to re-impact their team, because the impact we're making now during the pandemic and this transition phase is different than the impact that we needed to make beforehand. This is much deeper because people are searching right now. I also think, as I'm listening to your message on impact and persistence and passion and everything you're doing, the 3 Ps, the 3 Cs, I think your message will help with retention right now.
Well, that's exactly, you want to retain your good people.
That's yeah, exactly. Good point.
Yeah, there's some businesses out there that fail because they retain their bad people, but it boils down to, I'm not going to save your business. You have to save your business, but I will try to help you give the tools to make it easier for you to take the business to the next level, to raise the level of your game.
Yeah.
I tell people that, when I work with them, I say, I work with professional athletes, and I tell a few stories about athletes, but they're not necessarily the win one for the Gipper stories. But what I say is, the one thing that athletes are smart about is they have an off season. Consider this your off season, so you can work on something that you can get better at. And you have to kind of go all in. You have to get them to agree to do that, to meet you halfway. You know as well as I do, Eric, there are 2 kinds of speeches that we do. We do the speeches where an employee is forced to go and listen to the motivational speaker living in a van down by the river. And they start off the speech like this.
Yes, they do.
And then the second one is an association who somebody says, I really want to hear this. I want to learn. I want to see how I can take this back to my company, to my people, and so forth. So my goal always, I love to get a guy like this.
Yes.
By the end being like this. And every once in a while, when you turn that, it feels pretty good.
It's interesting when I started speaking and I walked into a room full of guys that did this, typically they were wearing yellow reflective vests and they were just not having it. And I agree with you. The impact on me, when you saw the arms come down and you saw a couple of head nods, and the fact that, usually those were, for me, typically male audiences where they're really standoffish, to have a guy come up afterwards and said, that wasn't too bad. That was huge. And I think that you are getting people to unfold their arms. And here's what I love. Now, obviously you're from Wisconsin. I have to assume you're a Packers fan.
No.
Okay. All right.
I grew up a Packers fan, but I've been in Minnesota since '85 covering the Vikings. So.
You've converted. All right.
The team you cover, you like to win. It's a lot more fun.
I love that. So I know Vince Lombardi once got back to the basics and said, gentlemen, this is a football. What I'm hearing here, I'm just paraphrasing, but leaders, this is an impact, and everybody can make it. Everybody can carry that ball. And that's how I feel speaking with you today. That's why I'm excited, because I do want to do the 1-2 punch with you. I think that we could offer a dynamic, collaborative approach to what we're doing, because at the end of the day, I'm a Marine who went into business. Here you are as a sports anchor, you're going into businesses, but we are focused on making an impact. I do have to ask you, what is in the future for you? You have so many amazing accomplishments already, 2 books. I'm guessing as a fellow author, you have the idea for a 3rd one already, maybe 4th or 5th, who knows? But what's upcoming in the next year for you that you're focused on? Any goals that you have?
Well, I want to get the momentum back from speaking in person. I think it's a little bit harder to have momentum doing the virtual speeches, because afterwards you're not physically talking to people.
Yeah.
And they're not coming up to me and saying, hey, have you ever spoken to 3M, this division, or my husband works at this company. You'd be great for him. Then you make the contact, and that's the way this business works. When you speak, I get speeches. Yeah. And in the viral world, you get them, but it's just a little bit different because you do not have the one-on-one communication.
That's right. You start seeing the participants just drop off right after.
Yeah. So The one thing I'm looking at, I've just hired another coach, and I'm doing some research right now. I'm interviewing CEOs, trying to figure out what keeps them up at night, trying to get out of. So I continue to do research because I'm trying to go a little bit deeper into the whole area of impact. As I talk about, when I talk to a CEO, I want to talk about your ROI, and they're like, okay, no, not return on that on investment, return on impact, and how valuable that is. These. And sometimes you got to get past the point that, this might seem like it's a soft skill. It might. But if you want to do business in 2021, you better have mastered this, or all the things you learned getting your MBA aren't going to mean a thing.
It's interesting that you bring up soft skills, which is what we teach on. But I've always had a problem with them being called soft skills, because these are the most essential skills for success. I mean, the people skills. But that word soft almost makes it seem like they're not as important, or I'll get to that later, because here's the hard skills we need to focus on. I am going to borrow return on impact, but credit you every time I say it, if that's okay.
That'd be great.
I love great acronyms. I love great 3-letter identifiers. I love all that stuff. Being in the military, everything was an acronym. So I resonate. They taught us so much, and everything had an acronym attached to it. Joe, I know as we're closing out here, I also want to ask you, you've not only made an impact on your family, but they've made an impact on you. I constantly hear you thank them in your speeches and everything that they do, going through cancer, going through the pandemic. How important is it for us to make an impact with and to receive an impact from family, to focus on family during this time period?
Well, more so than ever, because they also have anxiety. Yeah, they also, everybody's going through things.
That's right.
I don't have to tell you about, the kids who weren't able to graduate. And then, we have the Minnesota State hockey tournament going on right now. We've got teams that made the tournament that had to pull out because of a COVID from another player.
Right.
I mean, these are devastating times for these kids.
Yeah.
But I have found out one thing. I think it's really hard to be successful, however you define success, in your professional life if you don't have your personal life together. And your personal life starts at home. And, are you a great husband or wife or spouse? Yeah. Are you doing everything you can to be a great father? Are you making a positive impact, a negative impact? Here's the thing. We all screw up. Nobody ever gets this right. But if you get it 10% better, if you make one impact a day, it piles on. That's
correct. It's compounding impacting. I like that.
Ooh, that's not bad. Compound impact.
That's all yours.
I might steal that from you.
Yeah, sure. Well, I've already written down so much to borrow from you. So let me ask you this then. If somebody's listening and they said, you know what, I'm coming out of this pandemic, I'm in a transition phase, I've had a rough run of it lately, but I want to start making an impact. I want to become successful. I want to achieve greatness. Do you have any insights for somebody who's saying, right now, I want to start becoming greater?
Well, the whole secret to what I teach, I always say it at the end, it's not about the other person liking you. It's about them liking themselves. And if you're the person that makes that happen, that's when you've made an impact. That's when you're going to be on somebody else's Mount Rushmore of influence yourself. So what I would say is, if you want to go through that transition, reach out to people, let them know you care, acknowledge them, talk to them, listen more than you talk. You can't listen when you're on your phone. You can't listen when you're on your computer.
That's right.
And I really believe that when you make somebody else feel good and you make somebody else, call somebody out of the blue that you haven't talked to for a while, and just let them know you care.
We can all be a catalyst for impact. I love that. I'm already thinking of people I need to call right now, and people who could use an impact in their life. And the best part is when you you make an impact in somebody's life, it actually impacts yours.
It does. And it comes back, and it's all positive, and it's all good, and you never know when it's going to come back to you. And like I said, we all have our moments. We all have the condition called human, which means we make mistakes.
That's right.
But if you can make your mindset, that impact mindset that we're talking about, how can I make a bigger impact? How can I be a better teammate? How can I be a better friend? How can How can I help our company do better? You know, the interesting thing about people who are successful, the one thing I always say is, I talked about all these compassion, whatever, but if you want to move up in your company, help your company succeed. Do what you can. It sounds simple, but what are you doing today to make that company better?
That's right. That's right. Another aha moment. I love that. And that's what we need to be thinking about. Can we impact those around us, our culture, our business, before we ask what we can get out of it? Again, it goes back to the handshake analogy. Yeah. Hey, Joe, you have been making an impact in people's lives for a long time. And I can't thank you enough for being on our show today and for sharing these insights. It was powerful for me. I'm leaving this episode fired up, enthusiastic, and wanting to make an impact. If somebody wants to bring you in to their event, to their business, what's the best way to connect with you?
You can go to my website, joeschmit.com, and it's SCHMIT, 1 T, no D. I've got my information on there. I've got, things that I do there. My email is joe@joeschmit.com. And, I'd be happy to talk. Let's chat. If we can't figure something out, I know a lot of different speakers who can help out. And I've done that already, and I'm sure you have too, where people call and you say, you know what, I'm not the right fit. You want to talk about trust, you better get Dave Horsager,
Yeah.
You need Ross Bernstein for this problem, it's and that also pays off too.
Absolutely.
Talking about paying it forward, because then in turn they say, you get done speaking, it's now you better bring in Joe because we had Erik here last time, or vice versa.
Exactly. Well, you can be that catalyst for impact. Joe, I firmly believe that any organization would be greater having you in there to work with their team. So thank you so much for sharing. I'm looking forward to reading the second book.
Yes.
I'm sure there's a third one. I'm sure it'll become a trilogy soon, which is exciting. But thanks for investing some time with us today. I know you made an impact in our audience and our listeners, and everybody tuning in at a later point will impact from today.
Well, thank you for your service, and thank you for helping people think great, Erik.
Thanks so much, Joe. Appreciate it.